wanted to talk about this, the idea of teaching styles and teaching methods, and try to simplify things a little bit. Because I think in teacher education, we want to make things academic, and we're like, oh, well, what's your philosophy of education? We want you to write your philosophy statement. You know, that's great if you're ready to do that right now, but I'll tell you something. It wasn't until I was in my PhD program that somebody actually explained to me what a philosophy of education actually was. Until that point, I just faked my way through it. And I think sometimes we, like I said, make things too complicated. And I don't want to focus on talking about are you more constructivist or essentialist or those sorts of terms. I don't think that they help you. What I think will help you is to talk about teaching methods and teaching styles. And this is a resource that I really hope that you spend some time looking at and studying. This is really talking about teaching styles, and I think as you read this article, you're going to be able to remember back into your own education, and you're also going to be able to see examples of this in your O&P. So 5 common teaching styles here. The authority or the lecture style, demonstrator or coaching style, facilitator or activity style, delegator, group style, hybrid or blended style. So I think these terms are really easy to connect with. So what I also like about this is that they present these different styles here in terms of pros and cons and what sorts of teaching situations might be best for these different styles, and which is best for different developmental stages or ages of your students. So for example, the authority or lecture style. Now, every year I have, well, I should say every semester actually, I have a group of future social studies teachers who are absolutely excited about lecturing to their students. They had a teacher back in high school who was a phenomenal lecturer, and this is something that they want to do. And you know, I because of my own personal style, I I like shudder at the thought of somebody, especially somebody new to education, trying to lecture in a history class. However, there are a lot of ways that you can do this effectively. And if you're really excited about having a more directed approach where you are lecturing to students and presenting content, and just really giving them that information for them to absorb, I really recommend that you study how to make this effective, because there really are students and situations where this is very appropriate, and this resource will help you understand what those are, what some of the cons of that are, and things that you should really be thinking about. Then there's the demonstrator, facilitator, delegator, hybrid, and then it goes into talking about you developing your own teaching style. And this, I think, is so important. On day one, when you go into your next field study, when you're in methods or whatever your degree program has you do for your next field placement, you're going to start toying around with what your teaching style is. And as you get into student teaching, I hope that you will do the same, that you will try all, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling this so fast. I hope I'm not making anyone sick, but I hope that you will, try each of these and see what fits you best, what's natural to your personality, and what works for the groups of students that you're working with, and where these different styles might be most appropriate for different content that you're teaching. I'm going to scroll again, so if it makes you dizzy, just close your eyes for a second. So there is, I'm going to go back here. Here we are. Okay, so there are different models that are presented here that are really concise and I think easy to understand. And then we get into this idea of differentiated instruction. Now, differentiated instruction is this idea that you should design instruction to fully meet the needs of all of the students in your classroom. As you know, in your classroom, your students are going to have a variety of different levels that they're at, a variety of different levels of readiness to learn the content, a variety of different abilities. And so this idea of differentiated instruction means that when you're designing lessons, you're anticipating what sorts of needs your students have, and you're making options available for students to learn in different ways. And so this talks about teaching styles with the assumption that you are going to differentiate your instruction, which is something that we don't really acknowledge when we're talking about those really high level, very academic philosophy of education, constructivism, essentialism, progressivism, all the isms. And so this, I think, will really help you. Then this is talking about how this next section talks about how you can really meet the needs of your students and what is going to really connect. So I hope that this is something that I really hope that this is a resource that you will spend some time with and give some thought to. Because as we talk about what makes a great teacher, a lot of times my students will say, oh, well, I think a really great teacher is somebody who uses hands-on teaching and does a lot of activities in their classes and things like that. Well, we want to get deeper than that. We want to, first of all, recognize that teachers have different personalities and different ways of being in the world, just like all of you in this classroom. And so to say that this one way of teaching a lesson or this other way of teaching a lesson makes somebody a better teacher than another, that's not really accurate. So when you're out in ONP, I want you to go to different classrooms. I want you to observe different teachers. I want you to notice how different teachers have things set up differently. You're probably going to see a classroom that is absolutely perfectly organized and absolutely nothing is out of place. And you're probably going to see another classroom that is, it looks like chaos is going on in there. You're going to walk by a classroom that is absolutely quiet and you never hear a peep out of that classroom. And you're going to walk past other classrooms where it sounds like there's a ruckus going on in there. And that is absolutely reflective of the teacher's style, the teacher's personality, the type of content that's being taught, all of those things. I want to close with this idea that when I was teaching in this little teeny tiny school district way up north. We had one building for K-12. And so elementary school was on one wing and middle and secondary was on the other. And we all could see, because our rooms were very visible. We were very accessible. So people could see everybody else's room. My room was also the computer lab, and it was the place where everybody printed. So I had teachers from across K-12 popping into my room all the time to pick up something from the printer, which was really a pain in the tokus. I mean, it was, oh my gosh, it used to infuriate me. But what really was the source of my anger was that other teachers would come in and they would see my classroom and they would see my students and they would pass judgment on me as a teacher. My classroom was always very busy. Students were always moving around, doing different things. I was a big believer in using stations, and I had a very complex course load. And because of my position as a business ed teacher, the only business ed teacher for the entire high school, which the high school is very small, so it made sense. But I had to teach at sometimes three different classes in my one course period. I'll explain that a little bit later if we get to it. But so I would have international business in one corner of my classroom. I would have intro to computers on the actual computer stations, and then I would have, like, say, business math going on all at the same time. And I'm cool with that because, well, I'm an ADHD person, and I mean literally clinically. And so this really worked well for me. I liked that busyness. And when I had students developing businesses, they were actually creating products in my classroom. So it was messy. And it was also loud. So when, especially some of the elementary teachers would come into my classroom, they would see all of this chaos going on and they would look at it, and I could just see them looking around in disgust. And they would judge me based on that chaos that was going on, because their idea was, you can't teach in that level of chaos. Well, it was very effective for me, and more importantly, it was very effective for my students. At the same time, when we would have teacher meetings after school, and those meetings would be held in the elementary classrooms, that would give me a chance to go down and take a look at what was going on down there. And in typical elementary teacher fashion, there were some teachers who had, really beautiful classrooms set up with all sorts of different centers, and they were very inviting and very colorful. And I mean, I just loved those spaces. But then there were the upper elementary teachers who had the desks all set up in very tidy little rows. Each desk, and the chair wasn't attached to the desk, but each desk and chair had a complete set of tennis balls underneath the legs so that no noise could be heard when a student was pushing their chair in or pulling it out. Everything was very, very clean, very, very well kept, and very sedate. And I used to go down there and think, oh my God, I feel a little bit like I'm in a very sterile clinical environment. I feel uncomfortable. I feel like I don't belong here. And that feeling stuck with me it stuck with me to this day. And that feeling of going into a classroom and having it be one end of the spectrum, really crazy like mine, or other end of the spectrum, like those tennis ball classrooms. God, they used to drive me crazy. On the other end of the spectrum, I want you to think about what it feels like to be a student in either of those really different ends of the spectrum. In contrast, my best friend Pam, who was the science teacher. Now, a science classroom is also a very busy classroom, and there's always a lot of things going on in there, I would argue, if you're doing it right. And see, there's me passing judgment again. I've got to work on that. But her classroom was a combination of the two. So she was much more in the middle, where she had very organized area where she did her direct instruction, where she did lecture, and where students knew when they came over to this area, they knew how to behave. They knew what was expected, and they would do their best, for the most part, to listen to the short lectures, the long lectures, and participate as expected. But then there was lab space where students also were well trained in how to go over to the lab and how to participate over in the science lab setting. Now, of course, in the science lab, you're sometimes dealing with fire and caustic chemicals, so safety was one of the reasons why Pam had to make sure that students really were well prepared, well trained into how to participate, how to study, how to be a student in that lab center of the classroom. But going in there, students had less of a difficult time feeling like they could fit in. So as you go out and you observe different classrooms, I want you to tap into how you feel and how that space makes you feel. And what is it? Ask yourself, what is it about these classrooms? What is it about these teaching styles that are happening in these classrooms that make you feel certain ways? And very last thing I want to leave you with. PE folks, I would love it, and I would really thank you if you would invite your fellow classmates to come in and observe what's happening in a PE classroom. I believe that a PE classroom is one of the most effective places for reaching and connecting with students. And you do it when students are active, when those bodies are in motion, and you do it in ways that can really build the student, can really foster team activity, working together. And I really hope that you will invite your classmates into the PE classroom so that they can see what different PE teaching styles are, and how you in PE run your classes. Because let me tell you, we have a lot to learn from you. The way that you all are able to grab the attention of an entire class and get them to be active and yet meeting expectations. I always chuckle that those of us in academic disciplines, we're trying to get students to behave in certain ways and participate in certain ways, while they're really a captive audience. They're sitting in seats. So that's it. But I hope that you find this interesting, and I look forward to seeing some of your thoughts in your interactive notebook. And as you're thinking about what makes a great teacher, I hope that some of this stuff comes up. Thanks for your time.